Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie, and welcome back to another DraftKings DFS Slate breakdown. Wednesday UCL on our agenda. This time, I'm just coming off of watching that crazy Tuesday UCL slates. Arsenal getting the job against Real Madrid in that fashion was wild to see, and then Inter sneaking away to Bayern with the win was just two things I just did not expect at all. It was hard from a DFS perspective and GPP especially. Like, there's some wild builds up there, like Mikel Marino's and posted really well, like Lautaro. I didn't have a ton of just really cool to see just how like the chalk just didn't win it, and that was really cool to see kind of these out there builds getting the job done. But yeah, after saying all that, now we've got two super heavily one-sided ties here in terms of odds for these first legs, at least. Barcelona home against Dortmund and PSG home against Villa. So it's going to be a very different slate than our Tuesday one, where Bayern was the biggest favorite, it's only minus 110. Like, these two games are a lot more one-sided. In terms of projected lineups and set pieces for PSG, it'll either be Kvara, Dembele, I guess. Maybe Nuno Mendes sneaks in there. Maybe Hakimi sneaks in there in some fashion. The one thing I will say about them is that you shouldn't really be playing PSG for sets. They play a good portion of their corners short, on top of the guys who take their corners don't usually cross a ton from open play anyway. So like you're more playing like a Kvara or a Dembele for their kind of ability and like goal contribution equity rather than set pieces. Just kind of an added bonus, I'd say, on top of them. And then for Villa in this team, I guess maybe a Tielemans and Digne split. Maybe McGinn ends up having a share somewhere in there too. They have no Asensio in projected, who'd be the most likely splitter if he was in as the left-footed option. Oh, actually, Rashford, sorry, isn't projected too. It's striker. I didn't even see that, but he'd be the one splitting for the right-footed sets over Tielemans. So excuse me, it should be like Rashford and then Digne or maybe McGinn for their sets. And then if we see like Rashford on the bench or something, that's when Tielemans would come in to taking. Barcelona and Dortmund. Barcelona should be Rafi and Pedri. They're pretty simple. Like, there's not a ton of differentiation unless we see like Pablo Torre in or Danny Olmo, who I think are almost injured, and Pablo Torre is not going to play. And then also Yamal will sometimes take one or two, but it's usually a short corner, just one that he's just close to when they're in a rush. Then for Dortmund, they're just a mess. There is no Gross, thankfully, who is suspended. That's one less guy who could possibly take. I think Rierson is the most likely, and then maybe Ben Sebaini in this team. Schlotterbeck was taking corners for them a couple weeks ago. Now he's out for the season, so don't have to even think about that anymore. Another guy who maybe can take a thing or two is Daniel Svensson if he starts. He's a left back, so maybe what they do is move Anton to right back, Svensson left back. But they're just a mess, frankly. Yeah, they'll do a ton of different things. Like Brand maybe even can take something, but I think Rierson's probably the most likely. And in terms of prices, let's go to now. And this is a lot less soft than it was on Tuesday, let's just say. Like, already we've got Rafinha, who's 2K more than the highest player on Tuesday. Like, Mbappe was 8K. Now Rafi is 10, and he is the highest, at least. And I think he's probably just a plug and play in cash. Like, I'll even have probably like 75% in GPP or something crazy high, just because he's so solid. Best matchup on the slate. It's interesting that they have Barcelona as more favored than PSG. I don't really agree with that completely, just because I'm a really big fan of this PSG team. I think they go all the way, and like I think it could get ugly for Villa personally. But yeah, like the odds makers favor Barcelona slightly, not by a ton. And even with the matchups kind of even, like I'm happy prioritizing Rafinha over all these guys, just because he's been Mr. UCL, Frank. He's got more goals. He's got 16 goal contributions in 10 games. That's super crazy to see. Like, he was a guy who just did not have that in his locker, just like even last season. So yeah, like he's just been on fire all Champions League. Like, the one game he didn't have a goal contribution, he had 15-4. So yeah, I'm happy to build around Rafi. And then after him, there is Dembele, who I'm tempted by. There's Kvara, who I'm also tempted by. Like, I would not be surprised at all if these guys all become just insanely chalky in cash. I think it's going to be a super common build to go just Rafi, Dembele, Kvara, forward utility, and just kind of build from there. It's just a super stacked forward slate. All those guys are super appealing. And you also got like guys like Lewandowski, guys like Yamal, who are not bad options as well. I think you'll probably get a little bit overlooked in cash, but in GPP, like those are not bad alternatives at all. Like you can mix and match those five guys in like every build and probably be content with it. Just not even look at other players. However, there is Due and Barcola, who if you need like cheaper forward alternatives, they're both not bad options whatsoever. And like Rashford at 5,900, I like a lot. It is a tough matchup though, and you worry about his minutes slightly. I know he went 90 against Bruges, but I don't know if he's gone 90 in another game besides that one. Maybe against Preston when that game was already over and they just subbed off Asensio instead. Maybe he went 90 there, but it's rare for him to get that many minutes. Especially considering they got guys like Asensio who can come in, Watkins who can come in if we're just going off of this projected lineup. There's a ton of attackers. And Mullen too scored on the weekend. Like Villa have a ton of attacking options. They really rotate these guys like crazy. So because of that, like that is the worry there with Rashford is that there is a bit of a minutes concern. Same with Asensio if he ends up starting, or Mullen, like whoever they go with, there is just a little bit of minutes thing. Look at Ollie Walking at 3,500, by the way. That is wild. If he starts, like I'm gonna have a good share because that is so cheap for a guy who's Villa's top goal scorer this season, and like he's just their leading man. I know he's not in projected tomorrow. He's been a little bit off of form, but saying that, like this is such a disrespectful price. I don't know if I get them cash is because there is these just elite floor forwards in Kavara, Dembele, Rafi, Yamal even. But in GPP, I will have my share of Ollie Watkins at 3,500. That is so sad to see him fall off like that. Midfielders, it's an ugly midfield slate. That's why I'm so happy to prioritize getting up to these pay up guys in cash builds. Because who do you even want here? Like Fermin, like no one's dying to play a Fermin Lopez. Vitinha, he's been getting there, but like it just never seems that sustainable, and he's just never that popular because of that. He's probably your best midfield option if we're ignoring price, but 7K is not cheap by any means. When you take a 10, I just don't know how sustainable that is. Like I said, he had 120 minutes out there against Liverpool and only had a 12 with a pretty good flow for them. Like they were dominating Liverpool that whole game. So if he can get to his 10, I think he's on pens is the one thing you could maybe play for with the Vitinha at at this price. But like he's not an elite midfield option by any means, and he's kind of the best this slate has to offer. Other guys, like there's Pedri, who probably is your most cashy option just because there's set pieces there. They have him starting not as the 10. If he was at the 10, I'd be a little bit more, I think he'd be a little bit more appealing, like maybe even a lock. I don't want to say lock just because he's hard to fit if you're prioritizing your forwards. But I like him a lot more if he was in where Fermin is. Otherwise, he's still not a bad option. Like he's your only guaranteed set piece taker in the midfield position this week, just because there's no Gross and Tielemans won't take if there's Rashford. So I could see Pedri being popular. Like he gets there a lot of the time. I don't really mind that play at all. I think he's a little bit more appealing than Vitinha in cash. Then after him, there's just not a ton here. Like there's Tielemans, who I think is just not playable if there's Rashford starting. If there is Rashford on the bench, I could maybe see it. Like I'd be a little bit more tempted, but like I just saw PSG just kind of hammer Liverpool over two legs. So yeah, like I said, I have a ton of faith in this PSG team. It makes me scared to pick these Villa guys just a tiny bit. There's Fabian Ruiz. I played him one Champions League slate, and he did me well. What was it? This gave me 2 assists against Brest. I just stacked PSG that day. Happened to land on him, and he paid me off. But that he's been pretty bad. Other than that one game, I got him right. So I'm not dying to play him either. I think I'm kind of looking at midfield as kind of just play whoever fits. Like I'd rather go my forwards, just see what salary I have left over, and then go from there. Gavi, who I like a lot, like I always end up having a share of him just because a lot of times they'll play him on the wing or at this 10 position. And he doesn't do anything typically in terms of floor, but he's not afraid to get on the end and of like a cross, get a goal contribution somehow. Scored, I think, over the weekend. So yeah, like I always end up having a share of Gavi when he starts just because he's always so cheap. And yeah, just hoping for a goal contribution from him. And it's like Frankie, sure. John McGinn at 3K could get some steam just because mid is bad and he's just dirt cheap, especially if they start him in this 10 position. If we see like Motson to Digne, maybe McGinn takes, I'd love if we saw that kind of lineup It's probably pretty unlikely because Matson played over the weekend. Like Denier is their first choice left back. Like he probably will start. But just wishful thinking for me to get some hopefully more likely McGinn sets. Then defender. Hakimi has been priced up quite a bit now. This is the most he's been on a Champions League slate this season by a significant margin, like one K. He was 6,900 one week, and that was against Salzburg. He got there. To be fair, he had 30 points almost. But like that's a tough pill to swallow. Him being this expensive, it is not easy to go like a Hakimi. Let's just look at a build for example. Say we go Dembele, Rafi, and then let's throw in Kavar here with Hakimi. You do not have a ton of work with it there. It is doable, even if you're like with punting both mid slots. I think this is a doable build, but that is just tough to fit together. Saying that though, I might try to make that work in cash just because Hakimi's been so good. Just I think if there was a guy if I was to prioritize Hakimi or another forward, I'd rather get to one of these forwards who could drop 30 points. Hakimi's got that in his locker, but I think a 10 is probably a lot more likely. And I think that's just not good enough for 7,800. So I think it's a big question mark whether you play Hakimi or not. The issue with D is that there's not a ton of great alternatives. There's Nuno Mendes, who I never mind. Like he's usually okay. Once again, though, he's been priced up too, just like Hakimi. 6,600 is tough to get to as well. You can maybe go him over Hakimi. That's scary in its own sense, just because Hakimi's just better, frankly, in all round in terms of DFS. And then after those guys, you got I wouldn't really play many of these guys. Maybe Koundé and like a Barca stack, maybe Balde, same reasoning. And then you got maybe the Dortmund set piece takers like Rierson. I think Rierson's a lot more fairly priced than Hakimi. You just worry they just get dominated by Barcelona. That's just the only scary thing there. But if there's this kind of lineup, like I could see like a very likely, I don't say very likely because they always kind of switch off or switch their sets quite a bit. But I could see a route for a Rierson monopoly. And like I'm super tempted by that. He's gotten there so much recently. Like his worst score in his last, like I think this is when he started taking was this Shakhtar game was an 8 against Lille in that home leg, which you take at this price. So I'm a little bit more tempted by a Rierson than a Hakimi. I'd love if I could go both, but I'd probably have to get off of one of those forwards I like, and that's kind of scary too. So I could definitely see just starting your build around Rierson rather than a Hakimi, or at least prioritizing that for defender. And then the other guy I kind of like a lot is Svensson if he starts. Hasn't taken anything in a while, but like they really have no other left-footed options now. Like he's the only Adeyemi maybe, but I just don't really think he'd take. So there's a chance that he has sets, and 3,700 is a pretty cheap price. He's a pretty attacking wingback usually. He plays like even center back sometimes, which is worrying. That's the only issue there. So make sure you look at the lineup, see who's where. But otherwise, yeah, I like Svensson a lot, especially for this cheap price. And there's Denier too. Just a tough matchup there for me, and I worry a little bit about some sub equity there, just because they got Matson. Villa do a lot of subs typically, and a lot of times Denier ends up being one of those guys who gets subbed. Oh, my door is being blown open by the wind. But yeah, other than those guys, there's just not a ton here at defender. I'm looking at punts here. There's no one I'm super intrigued by. You know, if like most of you guys aren't even gonna play. Like a Kubarsi. I played when he got a red card, and that was tilting, let me tell you, against Benfica. But like I'd go back there if I just need the salary that bad at 3,200. Yeah, there's no one else like I think is really noteworthy at the defender position. And goalkeeper, as always, it was a crapshoot. It was a riot day for our Tuesday slate here. That surprised me quite a bit, just because the one thing I will say about goalkeepers on these slates, I kind of like playing the away keeper in cash games a lot of the times, just because they're usually dogs, they're usually cheaper. And on top of that, like because there's no away goals rules anymore, the home teams typically continue to push even after going 1-0 up. So you'll still get good flow for your goalkeeper on these UCL slates, just because the home teams want to kind of rack up the aggregate score, just because they know they have to go away in the next leg, and like away goals don't matter. Like so a lot of times these away teams are happy maybe losing only 1-0 you could get a pretty decent save floor a lot of the time. I did that with Courtois on this site, which was looking fine for a lot of the time until Declan Rice decided to have his way with me for my cash team with Courtois in it. So yeah, like I think on this slate too, especially when you kind of need the savings here, I could see Coble and Emmy Martinez picking up a decent amount of ownership on a site like this, especially because their logs are so solid. Like people just see this. We see these 9, 22, 5. Like he's good for 5 typically, other than that one game against Lille. But yeah, they see these logs and are just happy to go, these goalkeepers. But yeah, and then in GPP, like I said, like you can really get away with going anyone here. That was just mostly with a cash lens. I was talking about paying down a lot more frequently. And then in terms of a core, I kind of want to go like Rafinha, Dembele, Kvara, but I will not just because of it being pretty restrictive for a core build. I think you go Rafi, Dembele. I might put like John McGinn in my core. Is that crazy? Might be a little bit crazy, but like I likely play all three of those guys, especially if we see this lineup. If we see McGinn maybe further back, I could maybe go off of that, go a Rierson here. But I think it's pretty difficult to go Rierson and Hakimi. So I don't really want to put one of either of them in core just because I think it's a tough choice decision on DraftKings is DFS is which defenders do you prioritize here. But yeah, guys, I'm just putting Rafinha and Dembele in for now and saying I'm building on these guys. Like, these guys will be in my cash build tomorrow for sure. But yeah, that'll be it. Good luck, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.